Hey, everybody. So excited. September 8th. Everybody mark this date. National Parks USA premieres on National Geographic. This is a five-part series that you just really want it to be like all the parks, please. It is amazing. It takes us to Zion, Yellowstone, Katmai, the Everglades and Olympic National Parks. And we are so excited to have Jeff Reed join us. He's a showrunner and cinematographer. And today on this episode, because we're going to be doing 3 episodes on this park series because it's worthy of that. And I mean it. I mean it when you go see it. Look in the episode notes. I've got a link to the trailer so you can watch that. In fact, you've even just seen it by now. If you're just listening, look at that episode link. But you're going to want to see this. Today on this episode, we're going to talk about the nature connection, the wildlife. And I think what was so beautifully done in this series is you showed the biodiversity of America. You showed so many different wildlife species and why all of them, all the way down to a little grasshopper, is so important, all the way to bison, grizzly bears. And you also showed the importance of their habitat and how biodiverse the habitat is, and the importance of plants and trees and everything, and also the threats. So, welcome to the show, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, thanks for having me, Lisa. That was a great introduction. I feel like I don't need to add anything to that about our series.
I'm serious. Like, this is so epic. You actually made me cry. Like, really, and watching this, you made me cry of beauty. And then, and we'll talk about, I know you're going to be on the other episode with us talking about the indigenous people of the parks, but all of it was just too touching because I think our national park system is the very first national park service in the world, and we set it up, and then other countries adopted it. And I was raised in the bush in Africa, and like wildlife is everything. And I think a lot of times we think of Africa as the wildlife. And I think what you've done and everybody involved has really shown that America has incredible beauty. What do you think when you set out doing this?
Yeah, I mean, we first and foremost, we try to tell the stories of these places through the eyes of the wildlife. These are love letters to the wildlife, love letters to the national parks. And, we consciously included the Everglades for that reason, as
Hmm.
it was the 20th national park, but it was the first one that was, established with the conscious idea of protecting an ecosystem versus protecting a geological wonder. So Yellowstone being the first, aimed
Hmm.
at geysers, aimed at the hot springs, aimed at these things that people had, said we can't exploit it we can't exploit it for industrial reasons or build hotels over it. And the wildlife were sort of protected on, as bycatch of that idea. And then it wasn't until the Everglades where, the people who were the heroes of that park were saying, no, this is an ecosystem. You may not want to go there. It's hot, it's buggy, but it needs to be protected for the specific idea of its animals and plants. Um, and all the national parks kind of followed suit after that.
Hmm.
But, we
Yeah.
included that one for a reason.
Absolutely. We went to the Everglades in 2012, and we were there doing a podcast for a gardening expo, and they said, no, we're going to fly you out to do this podcast. And we're like, no, no, we're road tripping. And but we have to go to the Everglades because we've been doing so much with the National Parks Conservation Association on shows, but we need to go to the Everglades. And we went out, and you did a lot of filming in regards to the birds out there, and the threats they have from, there's boating, there's also climate change. And we went out there, and that's actually what started our Love Your Parks tour. So that
Good.
thing, yeah, I'm sorry, you guys made us emotional. So, like, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to put up with me now. But just kidding. But because I think, well, the Everglades is so fascinating, and it has so many threats with at the same time. Um, but you showed this just incredible beauty in the plants, which I really appreciated because I remember seeing bromeliads out there for the first time and going, oh my gosh, people are buying this from Home Depot, but here they are here. And I remember when the gardening guys go says to me, no, no, that just probably landed there from a hurricane. I'm like, dude, no, there's orchids, there's bromeliads, there's all of these things happening, and there's hardwood forests, there's all of this biodiversity happening in your backyard, and you're not getting it, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah,
And
and that
so,
drives the
yeah.
ecosystem there. Absolutely. I mean, the vegetation is it's driven by by just tiny elevation changes throughout the park, 10 feet or so over, 100 miles. Up high in the drier areas, you have the hardwoods, like you said. In the middle, you have, these more wet loving plants. You get mangroves. And then there's, it's hyper-organic, like you said, underwater too. The mangrove systems it's absolutely crazy, especially during the rainy season when everything fills up and you can poke your head underwater and it's nice, cool water. It's pretty amazing to be in. Yeah.
Well, you talk about water. Let's go to Katmai. You did
Hmm.
some amazing footage of grizzly bears hunting salmon underwater. Like, so how did
Hmm.
you, how did you do all this? Like, and how long did it take? How many? Because I know you couldn't be out there everywhere at once, right?
Hmm.
So I know you worked with different photographers. How did you guys actually get? I love that you did the aerial parts of it too, like the photo
Hmm.
behind me for those watching versus listening. Um, you see what I'm talking about. That's the Everglades. But if you go into the Everglades, you're in it. Whenever you're in a park, you're in it. You're seeing the trees, which is awesome. You're within the forest. But seeing it from above, and you did such amazing aerial photography, drone photography, however you did it all, you gave us this scope that we will never be able to see on our own going as a park traveler and understanding this critical, you know, these critical places, why they need this protection and everything. But that footage underwater, like how did you guys do all that stuff? I know no one's just sitting there snorkeling, right?
No, no,
Not
they
with a
try not to.
grizzly.
Katmai was filmed primarily by
Mm,
two just world-class cinematographers. That's John Shire, Dawson Dunning, and they are two of the people that like they'd be at the top of the list of somebody to go film bears in Alaska, right? They know bears better than anybody that I've ever met. They've observed and been alongside bears a huge amount, and they're world-class cinematographers, and they know how to build and create custom camera systems. So that underwater system was a Sony FX6, which is a standard prosumer level camera. It's a good camera, but Dawson built he modified a few different camera housings he found, put a huge front port dome on it so he could do those 50-50 shots that we call them. And so you
mm,
can see above and below. He had a motorized pan tilt head underwater so he could control it from far away, run a wire. And then he'd walk out into the water, set it down, and watch from a monitor from, a safe distance. He was still pretty close, but far enough that he wasn't gonna get run over by the bears, who are generally not, aggressive there. They've got plenty of food. You don't want to be messing with them, obviously, but they won't. If you stay out of their way, you're in a pretty good situation there. But if you're in their way, that's 800 pounds running at you, hitting you if you're standing there. And so he was willing to sacrifice his camera if it came to that. Luckily, it didn't happen. And yeah, we end up
wow.
with those unreal shots. And
So, but that's the thing. You guys all with what you do have to understand nature and have that patience of watching and learning. So you become biologists in a way, like
yeah, yeah,
doing
you
this.
you definitely do like this most important part of science, or one of the most fun parts in my mind is just that observational level, observing to learn. And it's straight up, the more hours you spend alongside these animals, the more you learn and the more you can read body language, behaviors, you can predict their behaviors, you can understand what's stressing them out, which is important to us to make sure we get authentic behavior and make sure we're not causing issues with the animals.
Mhm.
So we're able to back off, even if it's not these obvious signs of stress. If they're, for bears, if you're hearing jaw clicking, if you're hearing huffs, if they're chatting with their cubs a lot, they may back off and just say, okay, you guys do your thing and we'll be over here trying to film, a less shy
Mm.
bear. And John and Dawson
Yeah.
can really do that really well.
Mm. Well, I wanted to touch on all this because you have incredible footage that is just mind blowing, right? And the aerial photography, I think, is also there's a wildlife sanctuary out in Colorado that I think did this amazing thing. They're like, okay, they rescue animals even from hurricanes and wildlife, and they've been doing it for gazillions of years. And they didn't want it to be like here we are as a zoo.
Mhm.
And so what they did is they took the rescue animals and they wanted the education component with people. I mean, they had bears from circuses in Hungary or Russia that they had to get off of smoking cigarettes because that's what they were doing in a
Right.
circus.
Yeah.
And so they had to take them, they had to detox these bears, which were, they're not happy, but they didn't want them to be zoo animals. So they created this skywalk. So you're above the animals looking down. So no, your photos look like, no great stuff. Not like what you're doing. There's a difference.
Hmm.
But the animals are like, you're like a plane in the sky. So we really don't care. You're not in my trajectory right up in my face every day like I'm in a zoo, and their habitats are massive and awesome. They actually have one sanctuary that the animals are, there's lions walking in the wild in Colorado. It's pretty
Hmm.
cool,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
southern Colorado. So I was thinking about that while I was watching, the fact that you did so much from the aerial side of it, that it didn't look like any animal was stressed, and that you're backing off, because we do see people in parks, and I just want to say this, please, people, we love wildlife. You don't want to disturb them. There's very little places left for them to be. So we're in their home at this time, right? In a way, I know it's America's recreational place too, but as photographers, I think we're not going to be able to go where you go, right? You have to get all that permit stuff, which is like a whole
Right.
other red tape we don't want.
Yeah, yeah, and very expensive. So we have
Oh,
limited days on the
yes.
ground. So you spend a good amount. You burn some days if you get bad weather, and a lot of it's luck on that front. And yeah, like you're saying, the aerial systems, that perspective is huge for us. Sometimes it's from helicopter,
Mm,
with these gyro mounted big cameras on the bottom of a helicopter, and those are really expensive, but worthwhile days where we go out. And Katmai, that was done by a pilot and cinematographer named Daniel Zatz, who flew out of Homer. So he crosses that strait there and flies over Katmai and flies until he runs out of gas pretty much, and can land and fill up at King Salmon or somewhere close. But he got scrubbed by weather for a few times. And so we just try to hit that at the right time. He did a lot of the work in the 10,000 smokes. And then in areas that were technically outside the park, but near the park, which would be like the tidal zones off the coast, we're able to fly a drone to get some of those scenics as well. National parks, even for us, even for permanent people, don't allow drones to be taken off and landed within the national park. So we have to find ways, around that, and kind of work in these areas adjacent to the parks, and that kind of places it, just gives us perspective there, because that aerial perspective is huge for us.
mm.
And we found a lot of animals. Yeah,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
they they don't mind it. They don't mind the sound of it, especially if they're in an area like, coastal Alaska, where they're hearing planes, hearing boats, seeing those things. And in fact, they're, I think, more, they back away from a person carrying a tripod, more than they would a drone system like that or anything like
That's what
that.
I was
And
thinking.
yeah, yeah.
And for travelers going in to understand that balance with wildlife,
Mhm.
to not, it's better to be as far back away as you can, right? For wildlife
Yeah.
to not disturb them.
Yeah, and we'd rather see natural behavior from far away than unnatural behavior from close up. And we want to stay safe. Our cinematographers are out there. They're days away from rescue if they need to be rescued. And so even a minor injury can be a pretty big situation there.
Mm.
So we don't want to hurt an animal. We don't want to get hurt. We don't
Hmm.
want, to cause any issues all the way through that. So yeah,
Mm.
staying, respectful distance. It's why we have huge lenses. It's why we like
Yeah,
to stay far away. And
that's
yeah.
that's what the power of what you guys do, with these kinds of documentaries. Like, you're watching something that we don't get to really experience, and you're seeing things in wilderness, like all the glaciers and all of that
Hmm.
was incredible. Olympic National Park. I mean, what you got to see, to the biodiversity out of the five parks, Zion. Um, you guys were at night filming,
Hmm.
hunt, there were so many different things to be able to put together. I thought that out of, because we do want you to do all the parks, right? We just want you to keep doing this like every day. So just saying, but the Sequoias would like you to do it.
Sequoia
Sequoias,
would
they
be
just put
great.
in their
Sequoia
thing.
would be great.
They're
Yeah.
like, hello, knock, knock. And I'm like, just, I'll ask. But but the thing is, I think you did a really interesting mix of five parks that showed this diversity of what we have, because Zion is really interesting because you can go low down, and they have cool orchids too. But then
Hmm.
you showed like the desert part of
Hmm.
America to, like, the Everglades and the swamps, Katmai. We got rainforests going on in Olympic, so Yellowstone, you've showed this different topography and also explained the way the topography, the habitat relates to the wildlife, the birds, the whales, all of that. That what to me was really important that you explained that, like the importance of why do we need this one grasshopper?
Yeah, yeah, and I think a lot of that was driven by our story producer Avila Grenia, who's just can see the story of these places beyond kind of the little
Mm-hmm.
vignettes that that TV is, that we only get to show a few minutes of bison or wolves or anything, and so
Oh
we
yeah, that was
wanted to
incredible.
we really wanted to. The wolves are amazing, and like Yellowstone, for instance, has a character that goes beyond these many stories. It's the first national park. It's like was made for different reasons than we use it now necessarily, and it was their characters come about. You know, one aspect of Yellowstone is that it's this moving geological hotspot, and we really wanted to show that off. And we did that through kind of this introduction with steamboat guys are the biggest guys in the world. And, you know, what drives that? And it's really this evolving system that has been, driven for the last 15 million years, eruption after eruption. There's been many Yellowstones in the past. This is its current form. The Everglades with its just hyper abundance, hyper organic area, Katmai with this like heart of volcanism that created the park and or transformed the park and got people interested in it. And then the bears were kind of a second or an afterthought in there. They went there looking for the next Yellowstone, but ended up protecting this area of like unmatched viewing for brown bears and all the animals that are alongside them. Um,
Oh,
and so, yeah, I think like, finding that character in the park often starts with their origin stories. Why did they, why did we make it a national park? But then it goes beyond to hopefully we can try to figure out what brought people there forever, right?
mm,
Yellowstone has been home to people for thousands of years since they could walk, since the glaciers retreated from there and people could walk into Yellowstone, they've been doing so.
yeah,
Um,
it's and coexisting with wildlife, right? So
yeah.
I think that's what you guys do as photographers and filmmakers out
Hmm.
there. You're coexisting, and the communities around are doing that. And
Hmm.
so you're also showing like, hey, these are beautiful things. With all of you out there doing this, I mean, as a team, right? Did
Hmm.
it change you at all in understanding climate change? Because I think that was really well done in there to understand, like, you're looking at this beautiful thing, you're understanding, starting to understand the symbiosis between the different creatures and even plants and all these things. I mean, there's just so much to 5 episodes. It's amazing. Just five. Doesn't that mess you up? It's like kind of it's
Right.
the big five, right? It's the big five, but it's not just. There's no way. This was just so well done. Um, you've got everything from, you've got marine mammals, you've got everything to birds, the spoonbills, all of this,
Hmm.
even little chipmunks and stuff. But while filming this and starting to understand the race of time, did you feel that when you all kind of started putting this together and during the filming of this, like the tenderness, like the Mother Earth is, don't mess with her, she's hardcore, but at the same time we are. Did you feel that sensitivity filming this?
Definitely. And especially, we covered the spectrum here. We were in places like Katmai, which feel like invulnerable. They feel out of reach of climate change. They feel out of reach of anything because they're still wild. There are no roads there. But then in the Everglades, we are on the front line of, raising or rising seas, rising ocean, water levels there, you know, salt water moving in where it hasn't been in the past. It's kind of the most rapidly changing for climate change and for any kind of these large existential level issues. It's hard for our minds to ever understand that scale of time, but the Everglades you can. There was a great article that inspired our story about the spoonbills that Max Stone wrote for Audubon
Mm.
magazine.
Mm.
And I think it's called The Pink Canary in the Coal Mine, which we
Yeah, yeah, you
appropriated
you
for
talked,
yeah,
I heard that
yeah.
part.
And so he was an advisor on this episode with us and we chatted with him and he was pivotal to that spoonbill story because we needed to be working alongside the National Audubon Society and Audubon's Everglades Science Center. And they were the ones that got us out there and able to see, these spoonbills among their nesting areas. And yeah, that one was lucky because the spoonbill nesting, it collapsed that season. It's just a matter of getting too little rain or too much rain. There's, a movement of spoonbills going north up into the lands where they can feed better. They need that very specific water depth. And so their nest sites collapse. They move upland up into kind of more central Florida almost, out of the Everglades often. And so we're seeing that change. We're able to witness that change from year to year. There are scientists like Jerry Lorenz who have been working on that for a couple of decades now and are able to show enough data to say this is a piece of climate change. This is a reaction to climate change that's happening before our eyes.
Mm.
And it's, there's 100 other stories that they could tell along those lines. But yeah, it's rare to find that thing that you can grasp within a single season, especially our glimpse. And, we're in Montana, our production company. And so
Oh,
we
wow.
don't
Okay.
we don't think about the Everglades every day. And so it's to be able to go there, witness it, see this change, it's a pretty big deal. And then understanding the history of the park as well, how much it has changed based on pretty slight sea level changes over time over the last couple thousand years. So
Mm.
when Betty Osceola is in that episode and she's Miccosukee, and her ancestors would have been there before the Everglades were the Everglades.
Mhm.
3,000 years ago, Florida was double the size, and they would have been in a dry interior, and the Everglades would have been somewhere else. And so, just in their
Wow.
generations, that it's been a park that's created, and I think within our lifetime, and certainly our descendants' lifetime, it'll rapidly change and could collapse. And yeah, there's plenty of that stuff going on, and so it's a
Yeah.
good
I
way
mean,
to
that's what
learn.
you're saying. All those stories, thousands of stories. How hard is it to actually narrow it down, even for a episode that's 44 minutes,
Yeah,
and
it's
50 seconds, isn't it?
yeah,
Something like that. You guys
yeah,
hit it
just
on the
about.
nail on every one. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm just like, what
yeah. To
you
the
guys
to the
can get
frame,
to.
the
Yeah.
TV we go to the frame. So
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
it's incredibly hard to nail down what we're gonna do. We all have kind of, there's this balance of showing the highlights from. It's hard to do a Yellowstone show without showing wolves.
Oh, but that was epic. I mean, you
Yeah,
guys had a chase on the bison. I mean, that's amazing.
yeah, and from our favorite pack, the Wapiti pack, and this white female that led the pack for years and years, and she's just unreal. And I was lucky enough to film that scene
Oh, right on.
with our executive producer Thomas Winston, and he was there, and that was a cold -15 morning, and so some of the scenes come about by us being in the park, and they unfold in front of us. So we were
Hmm.
in Yellowstone. We do Yellowstone often. It's our backyard.
Nice.
We're able to go there and hear about wolf activity. And if it's a beautiful scene like that, then that becomes the through line of the show. And so there's some things that unfold like that. We knew we wanted wolves anyway. And then there are things like the lubber grasshopper and the Everglades, which is, something you see all the time there. Everyone in South Florida is familiar with the lubbers, and they're all over the roads all the time. They're unavoidable. But to capture that behavior, that was us saying, how do we do an alligator story that is different? That's not the alligators. If you watch them in the wild, um, they're rarely doing much. They're often sunning. They're often underwater. They're not these violent, you know, ravenous hunters out there that
Hmm.
fit with their reputation. We see these gentle sides of them, and how can we show that? How can we show the motherly thing? And we tried,
With a panther. You got a panther.
yeah, and that's Carlton
Like,
Ward.
dude. I
Yeah,
was like, no way, everybody stop. Stop.
and that's Carlton
Rewind
Ward,
again.
who's
Ah,
a Florida native and camera trap expert, and he's the one to be filming panthers and
panthers
bears.
and gators. Like all like
Yeah,
seriously.
yeah, and he's been out there for years and years doing it. Probably put in more camera trap hours than anybody I know by far. And he's a
How
and
much bug spray did you all go through?
We, what's funny is we don't, I try not to do much of it. It's
Yeah,
not
me either.
great.
And then I wonder, for years I'm scratching.
I broke down a few times. Yeah. I've tried to stay away from it as long as I can. It's not great for our cameras to have that stuff on your hands and to be touching
Okay, yeah.
the stuff. And so we use a lot of nets, body nets and head nets, but our hands are exposed all the time on the camera and they get hammered. They get hammered. And so I broke down and used some DEET. I tried the Thermacell stuff.
I've
No.
tried every organic thing and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, cinnamon, no, it won't.
Yep.
Lavender, no, it won't.
Yeah, it's got to
Nope.
be straight up poison. That's the only thing that works. And
Yeah, I
from
thought
then
at
on,
one point we could just cover, when we lived in South Africa, we used to say, just cover your body in rum, but
yep.
that didn't work, but you were happier.
Yeah.
That's, I think it just
Yeah.
ingested in. But you got, I mean, like when you think about the Panther, and that is just really lucky. So for him to be able to do that, he has got to learn, like we were talking about. So it's like
Mhm.
science and movement and the patience of that. And I think, when we're watching what you've done, I mean, all of you put together the work, it just, it's like, how do you even cut something out? Because like you just want to keep looking at that. Is so cool. You've got otters. You've got, I mean, the
Mhm.
what you showed about American, the plant life, again, I think is something always left out, the habitat. We've done so
Mhm.
much on wildlife conservation. I always go, without the habitat, you haven't got any of it. You've
Yeah.
got to build the habitat and protect that first, right? Um, you guys are so lucky with it. And I just feel like we as travelers going in have to look at how much work you guys do, and yeah, and ladies too, right? In having that patience of waiting for that. And we're all going off into parks playing selfies, and that's not the best
Mhm.
for wildlife. It isn't. There's a behavior to happen with that. So, can you share any tips for people going into parks? I know we're going to do a whole thing on park travel, but as a nature photographer and wildlife photographer, what can we do as park lovers, park travelers to be better? Enjoy it. Yes, share it, but maybe not, and don't hurt the wildlife while we're doing it, or the plant life.
Yeah, I think, that one's hard for us because we are often, in this,
You're
we
in the
get caught,
places we're not allowed to be, right? So
well,
stay on the path, all of us, but
in
not
some
not for
ways
them.
in some ways we don't get a lot of special treatment. We don't get to have like, backstage passes and so but we get caught in the same trap of being, okay, what's the biggest, most showy thing? What's it known for? Let's go after that and ignore everything else and aim for that with our cameras. And I think one way to really experience these places is to just let yourself be distracted by things that weren't on a bucket list necessarily. So Yellowstone being
Mm.
a great example of saying, we want to go see Old Faithful, but there are 300 or something other geysers in the same geyser basin and hot springs, and like let yourself risk missing Old Faithful if you need to find something that is not necessarily the top item on the guidebook. So I
Mm.
want to tell people about and Yellowstone often is a tiny little feature called Black Sand Pool, and it's about a 15-minute walk from Old Faithful, and it's just this turquoise pool that every once in a while will bubble, like every few minutes. But if you lay down on the ground right there, you can feel underneath you there is some sort of geyser vent erupting in underneath the ground and boulders being thrown around in there. And so you feel it rumble. And everybody calls it
Wow.
thumper that I know of. And so you can kind of feel it. And it's this little like treasure that I take people to all the time, and it's great. And
Wow.
it's really fun. I'm sure other people know about it, and somebody I forgot who shared it with us, but you know, I've found stories in the ground squirrels and the mountain bluebirds and things that people might drive by in Yellowstone, and those are great little stories to focus on.
Mm.
Um, I would say if you can get away from anybody you're traveling with just for a few minutes, like even once a day, even in the morning, being in nature alone is one way to really experience it without having the distraction of kind of trying to entertain or be entertained by the people around you or watch something. And I know that's hard for traveling families, especially. But
Mm.
yet those moments in nature alone have been some of the most special moments where I've been the most connected to whatever I'm experiencing because I don't feel like I need to have a conversation or anything. And
Yeah.
that's one way to do it. And then finally, I'd say in the Olympic episode, Gordon
Mm.
Hempton is our human story there, and he experiences these national parks through sound. And he's an acoustic biologist, I guess, acoustic
Hmm.
ecologist, maybe he would call himself, and he specializes in finding places that are unpolluted by human sound. And
God, that's so hard. I'm trying to
yeah.
do that. I'm trying to do that is do sound recordings because there is many people that cannot see a park,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Visually.
yep.
And everywhere I go, I hear like an oil derrick next to snow geese, like
Hmm.
in a park in Texas. And I'm going, there, the I wanted to ask you about sound pollution
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
I think it's like a hidden pollution
Hmm.
that none of us are getting because we're also used to sound pollution. We go to a park and we may not realize what the animals are going through. And as soon as I started to record it, I'm starting to think we're in trouble with that. Like,
Yes. So yeah, absolutely. That's, this noise pollution that we hear is a huge part of what we've started to notice more and
oh,
more.
by the way, you did real good. Noise pollution versus sound
Oh
pollution.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I
absolutely.
need
Yeah,
to
yeah.
elevate what I'm saying now. Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we actually talked about that in writing that as distinguishing sound versus noise. And so, yeah, it's a pollution that is actually pretty insidious, I guess, against animals that really live in these parks. And it affects everything from bird migration to bats to just, everything. And so finding quiet places is something that Gordon Hempton, who's in the Olympic episode, really specializes in.
Mm.
And you get this, like, you unlock this huge landscape, this unknown world that you hadn't paid attention to before. And it's a whole new way to experience it. And he does it with these really high-end microphones, but you can do it without a microphone, and you can amplify it with a cheap microphone if you wanted to. And we are constantly hunting for those soundscapes, these like sonic environments that are really try to bring you into the ecosystem. And sometimes we have to go about it in creative ways. In Yellowstone, the way to do it is to go in at night. And you get a night landscape, soundscape, but for things like geysers, that's one of the only times you're going to get in there without kind of the footsteps of tourists
Mm.
around you. And that's a whole way to experience Yellowstone that you haven't, most people don't get a chance to do. The park's open all
Wow.
night. And so you can go into places like Black Sand Basin or, Upper Geyser Basin, and just kind of get this incredible sonic environment. If you're lucky, the stars will be out. You'll see shooting stars, do it during a meteor shower. I recently, that big Northern Lights storm we had back in April or May was in Yellowstone for that,
Wow.
because where else would you want to do it? And
Yeah, no kidding. That's awesome.
yeah, yeah. And so I think, like, experiencing these places, there's always a way to do it that avoids kind of what people associate with a bad part of these parks. A bad
Mm,
part of Yellowstone is crowded, especially in the summer, especially during summer vacation. The roads are jammed.
mm, mm. Yeah.
And so if you change your expectation a little bit from having to see all the things on the bucket list, if you find something secret, if you let yourself wander and be curious, if you let yourself do something out of the ordinary, like go in at night or super early in the morning, be a little bit uncomfortable for that, that's the way to do it. That's the only way to do it. That's what we do as filmmakers. And it's worked out really well. And I think that's like my best advice for going into these places.
Yeah, and the nature part of it is too, you're being a little bit lighter footed for the park. You're
Hmm.
just giving, it's interesting, we say stay on the trail and stay on the trail, everyone. But I remember we interviewed an Apache gentleman who took guides into the wilderness in the Gila Wilderness area in New Mexico. And he was talking about, well, the Apache say, if, and we can't, don't do this. But this was like if it's just light-footed in one tribe in an area, you don't carve a trail.
Hmm.
You spread out so it's lighter foot, nothing really touches the ground, right? Because
Yeah.
everyone's spread out. But if
Yep.
we try to do that with mass people and cars and stuff, no, don't do it. So that's what I'm saying. But he was talking about that. He's like, the alternative is this, when you go into wilderness areas, split up and don't carve a trail. Don't disturb what's going on, don't step on this one piece of glass or grass, excuse me, that doesn't need to be stepped on, because you might be stepping on this whole other ecosystem, and it is true.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
you know
and in modern and other practices like leave no trace have adopted that idea. And
yeah,
so following that idea, yeah, if you're on a trail, single file, if you're off, spread out, and then,
yep,
try not to repeat your trail going back. And yeah, to constantly be in touch with your environment, to know what's fragile, to know what's durable surface, to know where to camp, and to, just how to live out there is critical. Because it's,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
You
And
did so much. I mean, just even caves and bats, and looking at you just at the balance. Did you guys really think about that? Of here's this beauty, and then here's this story of the threats, whether it's disease to animals like the bats, to the climate change, things like that, without it being this like alarm system. So the storytelling that you've done is, to me, very well done, in that it makes you still sit and think. I'm still sitting
mhm,
stewing on it all. Like, um I have to rewatch it all, to be honest, because there was a lot. And
mhm.
it I just feel like the stories were done in a way of, here's beauty, here's some things to think about, and let people come to their own conclusion. Did you guys think about doing that as a main way of?
Yeah. Yeah, I think for all our stories, we often come at it from a visual perspective first. Is
Mm-hmm.
it going to be visually
Sure.
compelling, right? And then we try to find the stakes within that story in some
Mm-hmm.
ways. So, that may be the stakes of finding a mate, or the stakes of being predated on, or the stakes of living in an anthropomorphic world where, they're always kind of on the brink of disease or disaster or climate change. Those are relatively easy to find in some
Yeah.
ways, is because everything is being impacted by us here. And then usually with those stories comes somebody that's fighting against that impact, scientists and conservationists that are working to make sure that that's kept to a minimum. So like Zach Warren, who you referenced in the first of the Zion episode,
Mm-hmm.
he's a cliffside ecologist exploring these areas that are almost like impossible for humans to reach, but not impossible for us to affect. So he's going up there and making sure that you know everything's okay, and he's combining that with a love of rock climbing, which we found incredibly compelling. Yeah, the moment I read about what Zach does, which I think was in Bat Conservation International magazine, he I was like, yeah, I want to film with him. And we reach out to him and say, that seems like a great story. It has, this cool dude that's doing a job that if I saw him doing it, as a kid, I would have been like, maybe I'll do that. That seems
Yeah,
like,
exactly. It's
um,
inspiring.
yeah, absolutely. And so, those are natural stories that come out of just research and planning out. And so like that kind of shoot we really do. And then other times it takes some work to find the stakes, and
Mm.
we don't manufacture them, but we sometimes have to dig deep to say, okay, why do we need to care about the plight of this animal or plant?
Mm.
And yeah, and at the same time, not making it doom and gloom, because it's really
That
not
doesn't
doom and
work.
gloom. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that doesn't work.
Yeah, and so, the wolves in Yellowstone are an example of that they were recovered species that weren't always in Yellowstone. So these
Man, they were
places,
looking so they thriving.
yeah, yeah, they're great.
That setup, that scene was just like, wow. Not everyone's happy because it's a hunt going
Hmm.
on right now,
Yeah.
but it's and you showed things that were bloody too, with vultures, and I went, oh, cool,
Hmm.
because I know I'm weird. Save everything, but then when there's a kill going on, I'm like, I want to film that.
Hmm.
I can't explain that to anybody, but it's a weird thing as a wildlife person, that
Yep.
you respect the cycle of life and understand what's going on, and you
Hmm.
want to see that healthy thing happen. But
Yep.
in closing, what is one of your favorite animals or plants from this entire series that you went,
Oh my
oh, this is
gosh.
so cool to see, whether it was you in person filming it or someone else? What is your favorite?
I mean, it's got to be, we've already talked about it. It's got to be the spoonbills for me in this one.
Yeah.
It's not an animal I thought about much. It's not a familiar one. They kind of captured me from the beginning when we started talking about the series as this funny looking bird with a spoon on its face that is, just an underdog from the beginning, having trouble getting out of its shell with this round bill, to its, overall story, its nesting habits, the fact that it lives in the South Everglades on Florida Bay.
Mm.
And that one was the way they sound, the way they feed. They're just a charismatic little bird that I now love. I'm a bird guy, so I'm always going to be most attracted to the bird stories. I think you know, they like, if you watch a bird for an hour a day, you like see this entire drama unfold in front of
Mm-hmm.
you. They do so much with their short little lives. And so it's fun to film, it's fun to explore. There's always another secret kind of with them. I couldn't get enough of the spoonbills. I wish we could be out there near them. We had to be pretty quick in and out of these
Mm.
areas, and the Audubon was setting up. We built these remote cameras that they could go up and set as
Oh,
researchers, and film for, and kind of, get these candid little moments. And those were risky because we had to leave the cameras out for several weeks, and only one
wow.
fell into the water, and I think that's a win for us. And
Wow.
if I can add a second one, it's just the straight up abundance of brown bears in Katmai National Park. I was lucky enough to spend a little bit of time there alongside John and Dawson filming that,
Those
and
babies.
just unreal.
Ah, those babies, those cute
Yeah,
little babies. But then the dude comes around. It kind of felt like now we're in city life. The mom is
yeah,
getting the babies out away from the dude, going, "Hey, I'm checking out the mom and I could take your cubs." I felt like, oh, she needs to go to another side of the street, man. She needs to go.
yeah. Um,
You know, wow.
all in for the
Mm,
sows and the cubs. The big boars, the big males are not my favorite. They're always moving around. They're always aggressive to
mm.
to younger bears, and so that, yeah, I root for the underdogs, the under bears in that situation. And I got to go to the 10,000 Smokes, Valley of 10,000 Smokes, and that was just the most
Mm.
surreal environment that I've been to. It felt
Wow.
like the most remote place in the world, and it's up there. And so, yeah, those are the highlights for me, and
Oh,
looking forward to
awesome.
doing more, hopefully, eventually.
Well, we want the series to continue, right? Can we all, what do we need to do? Do we
Yeah,
need
you
to all
got
call National Geographic and say,
that's
"Come
right.
on, we want
Yeah,
more"?
yeah. Call Nat
Yeah, we
Geo.
want more.
Tell them we need more national parks. Yeah, we need,
Thank
and
you.
we
There's
yeah,
63. So, like, you got a lot of work to do. Awesome.
63.
Thank you, Jeff. Everyone, again, the series is out now, September 8th. Starts September 8th, 2024, just in case you hit the archives. National Parks USA, again, on National Geographic. Thank you so much, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's Nature Connection show. Follow us at bigblendradio.com and keep up with Margot at margotcarrera.etsy.com.